Welcome to Resource PNG. Agriculture is the main source of income for over 80% of Papua New Guinea's population. It is crucial to the economic development of our country. This vital sector has been facing several challenges such as aging crops, a fall in commodity prices and high costs of production, just to name a few. In this episode of Resource PNG, we speak with Paul Barker, Executive Director of the Institute of National Affairs, to get an update on this vital sector. He first focuses on some challenges faced by the agriculture sector in PNG today. For decades, agriculture has been associated with production of essential food crops. At present, agriculture also encompasses coffee, cocoa, palm oil, dairy, fruit cultivation and poultry, among others. A stable agriculture sector ensures a nation's food security. The main requirement of any country is food security. Food security prevents malnourishment that has traditionally been believed to be one of the major problems faced by developing countries. Most countries rely on agricultural products as well as associated industries for their main source of income. Since agriculture employs many people, it contributes to economic development. As a result, the national income level as well as people's standard of living is improved. The fast rate of development in the agriculture sector offers progressive outlook as well as increased motivation for development. The agricultural sector in PNG provides the bulk of the population with its livelihood. Approximately 80% of the population is dependent on agriculture. However, this sector has more than its fair share of difficulties. Challenged by the high cost of production in PNG, aging stock of crops, particularly cocoa and coffee trees, and low commodity prices, PNG's agricultural sector is struggling to survive and compete in the world market with low-cost producing countries. We speak to Paul Barker, who gives us a brief update on PNG's agricultural sector as it stands today.
The sector has not been performing as well as it might have been. It provides the bulk of the population their livelihood and their cash income, so 80-something% of the population are dependent on agriculture. But it's really challenged by the development of some of the resource sector and the impacts that they have, which sort of to some extent jeopardize part of the agriculture sector. Now, the oil palm industry has been doing pretty well, but it's also challenged as well by the high costs of operations in PNG. But the way that they have been addressing the issue has been by really focusing on quality product and getting into the certified palm oil market. They're particularly selling through to Europe, and they're refining, but the certification process is a big thing worldwide in agriculture now. The final market wants to know the original source and the whole supply chain, and that it complies with various production requirements. So PNG's oil palm industry has been growing fairly steadily over the course of years. And it's partly because it's very much private sector managed, and it's a partnership between the large investors, the large estates, together with the outgrowers, the smallholder producers. But coffee and cocoa, over the years, the plantation sector has diminished, so the smallholders have taken up the slack. They have effectively increased their proportion of the production, but they've been struggling because you've got aging stock of both cocoa trees and of coffee trees. So they're struggling to be producing. There really needs to be a major replanting of the tree crops. And unfortunately, of course, in cocoa's instance, we've also had the cocoa pod borer, which has devastated production in particularly East New Britain, but spreading out to Madang and East Sepik as well, and a bit into Bougainville. But so these have been challenges. There have been also a major problem across the board. We've seen how in recent months the LNG and the oil price have come down, and the gold price has fallen down and slipped back as well, and the copper price as well. But the same in the agriculture sector. Nearly all the agricultural crops have seen their prices diminish in the recent months and years. Cocoa has kept up better, and interestingly, tea prices, which fell and have been really low for many years, actually have seen a significant improvement in recent months. But by and large, the agricultural prices have slipped back. The decline in the quinoa in 2013 and early 2014 actually gave a bit of a boost to the export agricultural producers, because we're price takers. These are tradable crops. And we receive the price in US dollars, and if there's an exchange rate which is not too strong, it's converted into quinoa, and farmers get a better price. So as the quinoa slipped, particularly after the construction phase of LNG, that actually started giving a bit of a boost to the agricultural producers. But then, of course, when there was the effective revaluation last year by the central bank, which was called an adjustment of the margins, etc., in trading margins by the commercial banks, but effectively it meant a revaluation that hit the agricultural sector quite a bit. Not everyone in the sector, but particularly the exporters. They were hit, and particularly those exporters who actually had shipped and hadn't actually been paid for their produce. So they would have purchased produce at one price and then received a lower price when it actually got exported. So that hit the exporters, but then subsequently the producers as well. So that was one of the problems that we're facing. The thing about Papua New Guinea, as I say, the majority of people are dependent on agriculture, many on subsistence agriculture, an increasing proportion in the vicinities of the towns who were producing traditional tree crops. Many of them have actually gone into fresh produce around Hagen and some of the other centres in the highlands and in East New Britain when affected by cocoa pod borer. But the problem is that by and large, PNG is a relatively high-cost producer. For competing in many industries with particularly the East Asian market, it's hard to compete. We need to make sure that our production costs are kept trim, and obviously the key is also to try and ensure productivity.
Welcome back. We continue our look at the agricultural sector with INA Executive Director Paul Barker. In this segment, he provides a few possible solutions to the current problems faced by the agricultural sector in PNG. While the challenges, though seemingly great, can be resolved through appropriate action taken at different levels. For example, starting fresh produce depots, improving the supply chain, improving road infrastructure and basic road maintenance, listening to farmers' needs and helping to support them by introducing appropriate policies and reducing bureaucratic red tape in tampering with export licenses and commodity boards.
In the 1990s, there was the potential, the Asian Development Bank was going to lend a major amount to the government for upgrading and establishing fresh produce depots, marketing facilities through the country, which would include consolidation depots and deconsolidation depots in the highlands, in highlands towns, and in the New Guinea Islands, as well as in the major urban centres in Moresby and Lae. Unfortunately, it didn't happen then. It would have been a very useful investment to improve domestic marketing. It didn't happen. It should still be done. It's still very much needed. Fresh Produce Development Agency is a small agency that's doing good work. NARI does some good work in the research area, but we need support for that fresh produce market chain, as well as, of course, to improve the road infrastructure to enable farmers to get their produce more readily to the urban centres, both for their cash crops, but also for these for fresh produce. And we need to assist so that when produce is being marketed, you don't just have containers that are filled one way, but they're filled in the other direction as well. So you can get, for example, coastal produce more readily up to the highlands and vice versa. And that can reduce the overall transport costs. But we need to make those sorts of investments. Unfortunately, we still are not good at putting the money into the basic road maintenance. We allow the roads to deteriorate. Many villages around the country that used to have access. We've done surveys in the INA in very remote and not so remote areas, talking to people about their financial capability, experience and needs, and they laugh at us and say, well, why are you talking to us about money? We don't have any money. We used to have money because we used to be able to sell produce to Lae and places, but now we don't have access to those markets because we don't have roads, and many of the country's airstrips are closed down, and so the basic functions of government in providing access to markets is not being administered properly, and really needs to be addressed. And a lot more money needs to be provided for basic road maintenance and in some cases restoration. And unfortunately, we often see what we did in the 1990s. We put money into status projects, grand roads in the national capital and other infrastructure projects, sports facilities and so on. And these seem to be imbalanced with the amount of money that really should be going into access and providing access for rural communities who are dependent on that infrastructure for accessing markets and incomes. As I say, we also need to be able to address issues like cocoa pod borer and other potential pests and diseases that could further damage industries like coffee. If you've got coffee berry borer into the coffee industry, that would be a severely undermine the coffee industry, as it has in some of the other countries. And we know it's just across the border in Indonesia. So we have to work to try and keep it out, but also to try and make sure that we've got plants that are going to be resistant to berry borer, and that we can multiply those plants and make them available to producers. Unfortunately, one of the problems that we're suffering is that instead of government listening to what the farmers' needs are and then trying to service those needs in the best way possible, we often see government actually undermining the farmers by introducing all kinds of bureaucratic rules. For example, tampering with export licenses in coffee and saying, well, coffee exporters need also to be producers. Well, some of those exporters were major producers in the past. They may have had plantations, but subsequently they, because of land tenure issues and population pressures and various factors, they've given up the plantations, but they are professional exporters. It is critically important that exporters know the market. It's a risky business. You can lose money as well as make money. And it's important that exporters know the market, they have the infrastructure, the warehouses, and that they know the risks that can be entailed. Because if you don't know the market, if you're not managing the products and you start exporting and have your produce rejected because it doesn't meet standards, that brings a bad name to the whole of the PNG industry, whether it's coffee or cocoa or whatever. So it's critically important that PNG exporters, processors and producers are working together, and that they are professional and that they meet the market demands, because we're, as I say, we're dealing with tradables that are with prices that are set at the world market, and that PNG, to be able to compete, produces a good quality product and really needs to be homing in on the niche markets.
You're watching Resource PNG. In this segment, we continue our discussion with INA Executive Director Paul Barker.
Recognizing that some of the government institutions, particularly in the traditional activity of extension, are extremely weak or non-existent. But those partnerships with the private sector players, as with the PPAP, are a valuable way to go about, where the private sector does provides some of the technology, some of the planting material, but also provides some of the extension services on a partnership with farmers groups, cooperatives and other networks. So that's a valuable mechanism. We need it to spread. We need to learn from those techniques and look at the other innovators, support the other innovators and assist the other innovators to assist, whether it's, as I say, in fresh produce or spices and so on. For example, at the moment there is a small network of some of the retailers in fresh produce who have got together and are assisting farmers in particularly in the highlands, but potentially in some other areas. There are groups like some other groups who are assisting or starting to assist in the Goilada area, which is again a very local area where higher altitude fresh produce can be produced and brought to Moresby if the road infrastructure is adequate. So there are these private sector players, but all around the world, innovation, the state supports innovation, and the state needs to be supportive of innovation in PNG too. The state supports the basic provision of infrastructure, whether it's roads or even or airstrips, or even the provision of subsidies for air freight or access to remoter areas. So, a suitable partnership where the government doesn't blow its money, but it's using its money wisely to assist farmers. Now, we know what's happening in some provinces. The provincial governments and in some cases the local MPs and the districts are actually providing a bit of assistance in New Ireland, in Milne Bay, I think in Oro a little bit as well. They're providing a little assistance to their agricultural producers. In the old days, it used to be the national government that provided this sort of support, but unfortunately we've allowed many of the national agricultural institutions to fall pretty moribund. The Agriculture Department still has some good people in it, but as an institution it's pretty moribund, and it's not really servicing the needs of the farmers. So in some cases, some of the provinces have been making a bit of an effort to assist, and it means a bit of an ad hoc program. So you get something happening in one district or in one province, but and not in another. So, but just recently, yes, we've seen a bit of a lack of or poor leadership coming out of Agriculture Department, whereas where they're actually causing a handicap to farmers rather than providing the assistance. So a strong message was sent from the Rural Industries Council, the Business Council, the CIMC agriculture sector, saying to the Prime Minister recently, saying, look, please, agriculture is so critical. You need to actually address its needs, listen to the farmers and support and provide suitable support rather than trying to manipulate or bully or chop and change institutions, appoint one-tox on boards and so on, because these are all sending the worst messages to agricultural producers who are like any other business people. They're going to put their time, their land and their effort into being producers or into agricultural marketing, but they're not going to do it unless they know that they're going to get a return on their effort. So more responsiveness to their needs. And you've got some industries like rubber, which have been also suffering because, again, they've had really low prices. It's much of the rubber in PNG is produced in very remote areas, like across the whole of Western Province, and yet it's providing the only cash income to a large portion of the population of Western Province. So you've got the low prices, and before you were getting the assistance from previously from Octedi, and then the function was passed on to PNG Sustainable Development, and you've had this period where the subsidy that was coming from them to the farmers, which just effectively, it was a freight subsidy and effectively brought the price to the growers up from a level where it wasn't worth their while producing to a level where it was, and didn't cost a lot of money, but it was a very valuable input. But again, it's since the effective closure of PNG STP and the change of ownership of Octedi, a lot of that level of support has disappeared in Western Province. So we hope these various things can be resolved. We've seen the government has put or government institutions, particularly PNG STP, has put money into the 9 Mile hydroponics. It's good to see money going into agriculture. We've also already had for many years the hydroponics up in Sugeri, but we need to see that's effectively an overseas business. It says it's not competing with the smallholder producers, and yet we've not been providing that sort of level of support to the domestic local producers. So it would be good to see support going across the board to different innovations in agriculture, in fresh produce, and including to the farmers in the highlands, in the islands, and in the vicinity of Port Moresby. And new innovations, including hydroponics, are good, but we shouldn't be just providing assistance to a few elite projects, but we should be providing that sort of assistance also to the smallholders as well.
And that brings us to the end of this episode of Resource PNG. If you want to contribute to this program, get in touch with us via email on resourcepng@mtv.com.pg. To view this edition again, log on to www.mtv.com.pg, where you will find a link to the Resource PNG page. Until the next time, pleasant viewing.